Kensington blocks.
Occupants 726 Clearfield. This is the FBI. Come out the front door with your hands.
Neighborhood blocked off with hundreds of law enforcement. And about 8 hours later, officials say they dismantled a decade-long, 24-hour...
Imagine a quiet industrial strip in Houston turning into a scene straight out of an action thriller, with federal radar screens flashing, sirens blaring, and the roar of traffic abruptly stopping. That was the reality this morning, as the FBI, DEA, and Texas Highway Patrol launched a midnight raid that unmasked one of Texas's most sinister criminal empires, the CJNG cartel's sprawling human trafficking and drug distribution network. In a single coordinated operation, they seized over $3 billion in cash and 4 tons of illegal drugs, while rescuing dozens of homeless men and women who had been lured into a nightmare of exploitation. This isn't just another bust. This is the largest takedown of its kind in state history, and it's reshaping the fight against organized crime across the Southwest. Stay with us as we dive into the details, the tactics, and the human stories behind this unprecedented raid. Good evening. Tonight, a sweeping operation unfolded across Texas that has stunned the nation. Federal and state agencies moved with a precision most reminiscent of a military strike, dismantling what authorities describe as the largest human trafficking network ever uncovered in the state. In the early hours of March 15, a coordinated assault on 5 counties yielded 20 arrests, the liberation of dozens of enslaved individuals, and the seizure of an astonishing haul, over $3 billion in cash and 4 tons of narcotics. This is the story of that raid, the intricate web that made it possible, and the human cost hidden behind the cold steel-lined walls of warehouses and convenience stores. The crack of dawn on March 15 in Houston, Texas, was broken by the glow of alarm lights that flared across federal radar screens. Analysts had been tracking a series of anomalies for months: uncharacteristic traffic patterns around a chain of convenience stores, suspicious ATM withdrawals, and the synchronized movement of people along predetermined routes. The data pointed to one chilling conclusion: a criminal organization was using legitimate storefronts as bait, luring homeless people into a system where they would be forced to serve as human couriers for drug trafficking, all while remaining invisible to traditional law enforcement surveillance. The operation had been in the works for 6 months. Investigators from the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Texas Highway Patrol had been quietly piecing together evidence that painted a picture of a vast, industrial scheme. This network did not simply smuggle drugs across borders. It had integrated human trafficking into its logistics, turning vulnerable individuals into expendable assets. Every day, dozens of homeless people vanished from their usual haunts on the streets of Houston, Austin, and Dallas. They were not taken to shelters but were recruited under false promises of food, shelter, and a small payment. In reality, they were shackled into a system that treated them as pawns in a larger game of profit and power. Their movements were meticulously timed. They would arrive at small stores, gas stations, and warehouses, receive a package, and then disappear into the night, destined to deliver illicit substances to customers waiting in the shadows. Intelligence revealed the sheer scale of the operation. More than 20 suspects were controlling hundreds of homeless individuals through a network of coordinators operating out of ostensibly ordinary businesses. By early March, the full picture emerged. Financial flows had been mapped through shell companies registered in Texas, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Funds moved through a labyrinth of anonymous accounts disguised as payments for logistic services and consulting. Each transaction was designed to slip past automated monitoring systems. Meanwhile, physical surveillance showed the same individuals arriving at stores at precise times, receiving instructions, and then disappearing into city traffic. Homeless people were picked up in vans, given packages, and sent to addresses where customers were already waiting. The technology the criminals employed was strikingly simple yet brutally effective. No sophisticated communication systems were involved. The network relied on disposable couriers who were not tracked by law enforcement databases if they simply disappeared. Over the course of 6 months, investigators recorded the disappearance of 43 individuals whose bodies were never found. Those who resisted or tried to escape were assumed to have been eliminated. This was not merely drug trafficking, it was an industrialized exploitation of human vulnerability turned into a business model. The breakthrough came on March 8. One of the recruited homeless men managed to escape and contact the local police department. His testimony confirmed the investigators' worst fears. He described being held in the basement of a warehouse, fed only once a day, and forced to work under threat of violence. Each day, he was given a ration of drugs to distribute. If he failed to return with money or goods, he was punished. A subsequent medical examination revealed evidence of beatings, burns, and chemical injuries from prolonged exposure to fentanyl and methamphetamine. This witness became the key to an operation that would change how law enforcement agencies approach hybrid crimes that blur the lines between human trafficking and drug smuggling. By midnight on March 14, the scene had shifted from suspicion to operational necessity. Unassuming stores and warehouses scattered across 3 Texas cities were, in fact, nodes of a single criminal network disguised as legitimate businesses. High-resolution satellite imagery, thermal cameras, and hours of drone surveillance revealed patterns that were inconsistent with normal commercial activity. Instead, the buildings displayed round-the-clock activity with regular arrivals of vans after hours, a clear sign of coordinated operations hidden beneath the surface of the city's normal rhythms. Investigators uncovered a complex logistical system. Financial analysts traced payment chains through dozens of shell companies registered in Texas, New Mexico, and Mexico. Each transaction was disguised as a legitimate business transaction: vehicle rentals, purchases of goods, payments for services. But the frequency of payments and their sizes indicated an organized structure with precise financial planning. Money passed through cryptocurrency exchanges, then converted back into dollars through banks registered to front companies. Each point in the financial chain was protected by layers of anonymity, requiring months of painstaking work to reconstruct the full picture. Physical surveillance complemented the digital analysis. Over the course of 3 months, undercover officers tracked the movements of key suspects. The same individuals appeared at specific locations at specific times, coordinating the arrival of vans carrying homeless people. Cameras captured people being unloaded at back entrances, brought inside, and not released for several days. Thermal scanners recorded crowds in basements that were officially not residential. This data confirmed that the warehouses were actually holding centers for people forced to work as couriers. Between March 10 and 13, intelligence began to flow with increasing intensity. Satellites tracked a convoy of 8 minivans traveling from northern Mexico across the border toward Houston. GPS trackers secretly planted on suspicious vehicles weeks earlier activated near known locations of the criminal group.
And the director of the FBI says this is the largest takedown he's ever seen, and everyone should be.
This confirmed that a large shipment was underway, either new recruits, another drug shipment, or both. Analysts calculated that if the network were to continue its current pace, it would soon be moving over 200 individuals and several thousand kilos of narcotics across Texas each month. The stakes grew with each passing day. The Joint Task Force recognized that the criminals had built warning systems and backup escape routes into their structure. The task force had to act within a narrow pre-dawn window, lest dozens more people remain enslaved and a new shipment of drugs flood the streets of Texas, fueling a wave of overdoses and funding the criminal empire for months to come. The risk of resistance and the presence of hostages had to be factored into every plan. Analysts accounted for resistance scenarios, the possible presence of hostages, and the need to quickly process evidence on site. The stakes were both human and strategic. If the Joint Task Force failed to act within the pre-dawn window, dozens of people would remain enslaved, a new shipment of drugs would flood the streets of Texas, fueling a wave of overdoses and providing funding for the criminal empire for months to come. If the raid succeeded, it promised not only to free the victims and seize the drugs, but also to destroy a critical node in a network spanning multiple states and international borders. This dilemma pressed the team as the clock ticked down to the invasion. As satellite passes became more frequent and radio silence settled, the final briefing moved up the chain of command. The synchronized breach, evidence recovery, victim release, and immediate work with on-site digital devices to generate new leads were all set to be executed within a tight pre-dawn window. What the analysts could not foresee was how fiercely the network would resist, and how one misstep in a tense situation could erupt into a confrontation that would alter the entire course of the operation. The prognosis was grim but clear. The next phase of the mission would not be a quiet surgical operation. It would be one of the largest and most complex manhunts conducted in Texas in recent years. Speed, coordination, and the willingness to employ military precision against a criminal enterprise operating like a corporation would determine whether the Joint Task Force could stop the network before it moved the next batch of victims and drugs. Operation Clean Streets transitioned from planning to action just after midnight on March 15. By 2:15 a.m., the 4-axis task force was in position. SWAT teams surrounded the Houston facilities. DEA agents sealed off access routes in Dallas. FBI units deployed in Austin, and Texas Highway Patrol officers monitored all intercity highways. Command and control was rigorous. Live drone feeds, signals, intelligence, and the analyst lab at central headquarters were synchronized to a single countdown. The goal was surgically precise: breach the facilities, seize evidence, free the hostages, and arrest all members of the criminal group before dawn. When explosive charges blew the doors off the first warehouse in Houston at 2:16 a.m., steel panels shattered and operators rushed forward. Night vision goggles transformed the darkened room into a mesh of shifting shadows. Plastic drums of chemicals glinted under emergency lighting as masked figures skewered for cover. Within seconds, the situation devolved into a standoff. 3 security guards opened fire with semi-automatic pistols before being neutralized by return fire. Adrenaline and procedure prevailed, but chaos was immediate. Simultaneously, similar breakthroughs rocked Dallas and Austin. A total of more than 140 officers stormed 11 facilities in 90 seconds. Small spaces designed as storage areas were transformed into detention zones. The air filled with choking acid smoke from alarm grenades and ruptured chemical containers. Teams followed a well-established pattern. The first wave cleared, the second wave secured the perimeter, and the last wave moved in to secure the hostages. The warehouse in Houston held the bulk of the network's narcotics cache: 4 tons of cocaine, several tons of methamphetamine, and a staggering amount of fentanyl. In the basement, hidden rooms lined with concrete slabs held dozens of human bodies. Victims who had been forced to deliver these drugs for weeks. Their throats were raw, their eyes glassy from a lack of sleep, and their skin mottled from exposure to harsh chemicals. The task force moved with surgical precision, but the reality on the ground was far from smooth. The warehouse's chemical stacks were left unsecured. The air was thick with a sour odor that seeped through cracks, a dangerous reminder of the drugs that had been transported there. Every second counted. The team had to neutralize the guards, free the victims, and secure evidence before the night could end. The raid on Dallas was no less intense. SWAT teams moved into the city's convenience storefronts, sealing off entrances. The warehouse on the outskirts of the city burst open at 2:20 a.m. with the sound of gunfire echoing down the alleyways. Officers worked through a labyrinth of concrete corridors, clearing rooms that had been turned into makeshift prisons. The smell of stale coffee and burnt plastic mingled with the metallic taste of fear that hung in the air. In Austin, FBI agents converged on a storage unit that had been used to hide both the drugs and the human couriers. They moved through a series of rooms, each more claustrophobic than the last, where victims had been kept in shackles for weeks. The task force used a combination of flashbangs, tear gas, and chemical arms to disorient the guards and create openings for the rescuers. Victims were freed in a staggered process. Once the guards were neutralized, officers moved to the basement where dozens of shackled individuals were discovered. The relief on their faces was palpable. Many had been trapped for so long that they had lost all sense of hope. The task force made sure that each person received immediate medical attention, antidotes for fentanyl, pain management, and basic first aid. Some victims were severely ill from drug exposure and required emergency intervention. Officers worked quickly to stabilize them, record their statements, and document the abuses that had occurred. In the weeks that followed, the Joint Task Force continued to press the network into submission. A key warehouse was seized in Dallas that contained not only drugs but also a complex digital system. Inside, the criminals had left a trove of laptops, servers, and encrypted devices that were immediately seized and analyzed. The data extracted from these devices provided new leads that traced the network's connections beyond Texas, into other states, across the U.S. border, and into several Latin American countries. The arrest of 20 individuals was a significant blow, but the network structure had allowed for rapid adaptation.
And Roman Montañez. The indictment says they flaunted their enterprise like a successful business, even writing down work schedules.
As investigators pieced together the digital breadcrumbs, they discovered that the organization was prepared for a swift relocation of both its human and drug assets. The human cost of this operation is immeasurable. The stories of the liberated individuals speak of months of fear, humiliation, and physical abuse. They had been promised a fresh start but were forced into a system that treated them as expendable commodities. The release of these victims is a testament to the dedication and perseverance of the agencies involved. It is a reminder that behind the headlines and the numbers there are real people whose lives were upended. The seizure of 4 tons of cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl is a staggering victory for public safety. These drugs are responsible for countless overdoses each year. By removing them from circulation, the task force has taken a decisive step toward reducing the drug-related harm that plagues communities across Texas. The confiscated cash, over $3 billion, will be returned to law enforcement databases, ensuring that the money cannot be relaunched into illicit activities. Operation Clean Streets demonstrates the importance of collaboration. The Joint Task Force relied on seamless integration of technology, human intelligence, and tactical prowess. The use of drones for real-time surveillance, the deployment of undercover agents to infiltrate the network, and the swift mobilization of SWAT teams all converged to create a comprehensive assault. This operation underscores the necessity of treating organized crime with the same rigor and precision that would be employed in a military operation. The network had been operating like a corporation, with supply chains, profit margins, and risk mitigation. It required a corporate-level response to bring it to its knees. As the dust settles over the Houston facilities, Dallas and Austin, the aftermath of the raid will be felt for months to come. Victims will receive long-term care and counseling, while prosecutors will build cases against the remaining members of the network. The seized evidence will be painstakingly catalogued, ensuring that every document, every digital file, every piece of physical proof is preserved for the courts. The network's financial infrastructure will be dismantled, and the pathways that once allowed for the easy movement of drugs and victims across state lines will be severed. This operation has shown that when federal and state agencies unite, the line between law enforcement and the battlefield can blur. But the goal is not to create a war, it is to protect communities, free victims, and restore the rule of law. The bravery of the officers who risked their lives to breach warehouses, neutralize armed guards, and secure the safety of the hostages is a testament to the human cost of the struggle. Their actions have brought an end, for now, to a chapter of exploitation that had hidden itself behind the facade of convenience stores and warehouses. As the evening draws to a close, the nation must remember the faces of those rescued, the stories of those who endured unimaginable suffering, and the relentless pursuit of justice that led to this moment. The fight against organized crime is far from over, but Operation Clean Street stands as a milestone, a reminder that with speed, coordination, and unwavering resolve, a joint task force can bring an end to even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. The dawn of March 15th was not only a new day for Texas, it was a day that proved the capacity for collective action to break the chains of human trafficking, seize the drugs that harm, and restore hope to those who had been forgotten in the shadows. The night after the raid was not simply an end to a single criminal operation, it became a turning point for the entire criminal enterprise. As the last of the warehouse doors shut behind the police and the bright glow of street lamps faded over Houston, a new mission unfolded, one that extended far beyond the physical confines of the seized buildings. First responders from the Medical Services Division raced into the basement, where rows of cages, constructed from cold, rusted wire mesh, stood as stark reminders of human suffering. In the dim glow of portable lights, they found 23 people, faces etched with exhaustion, bodies shredded by neglect, and throats marked by the cruel marks of restraint. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, dust, and chemical residue, a visceral testament to the long-term abuse endured by those trapped. Every step of the process, lifting a victim from a cage, checking for injuries, applying intravenous fluids, was carried out with the urgency of a battlefield medic who had been trained to stabilize, but also to preserve the fragile dignity of those rescued. Simultaneously, investigators moved with equal purpose. They recorded every interview, capturing testimonies that would later form the backbone of both criminal prosecutions and humanitarian cases. These interviews served a dual role. First, they identified the chain of command and the identities of the traffickers. Second, they painted a chilling portrait of a system that recruited and enslaved individuals through false promises of temporary housing, then punished non-compliance with brutal quotas. In many cases, the victims described a methodical process where they were forced to work in chemically hazardous environments, mixing solvents, inhaling vapors, and enduring the relentless heat of production lines that produced near-pharmaceutical-grade meth. The physical evidence, burns, respiratory damage, and chemical exposure, reinforced the forensic findings. When the medical and investigative teams completed their initial work, a third priority emerged: evidence. From the ground floor of the warehouse, a staggering 4.5 million kilograms of drugs, 4 tons of narcotics, the bulk of which comprised cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine, were discovered. Under the harsh fluorescence of lab lights, forensic analysts examined the samples. The presence of crystalline, nearly pure meth confirmed that the operation was not a hobbyist endeavor but an industrial-scale production facility. Chemical assays revealed the presence of heavy metals and other byproducts, indicating that the traffickers had access to sophisticated equipment and raw materials, possibly supplied through clandestine channels from Mexico to Texas. The magnitude of these seizures surpassed the estimates that had circulated online. Over $3 billion in cash was also extracted, stacked in neat piles that mirrored the weight of the drugs beneath. The evidence gathered was not limited to the physical. High-tech digital forensics teams, stationed in a secure hangar just outside Houston, surrounded themselves with confiscated hard drives, encrypted tablets, and the central server that had functioned as the nerve center of the operation. The data extracted from that single server, amounting to 1.7 terabytes, was a sprawling map of the enterprise. Within it lay financial ledgers that spanned months, GPS logs that plotted the routes of smuggled shipments, and encrypted messages that employed multi-layered encryption protocols designed explicitly for offshore banking. Each data packet was meticulously parsed, each file recovered, and each digital breadcrumb followed. The sheer volume of information demanded a full-night effort from the FBI's digital forensic specialists, who worked tirelessly to decrypt, restore, and catalog each file, knowing that each document could link a shell corporation to a cartel, or a smuggler to a prison sentence.